So we're incredibly honored here today to have Chief Harley from the Semiahmoo First Nation to share with us his deep knowledge of this place. And so he's going to be talking to us. The City of Surrey is recording this. So there's a video camera going on over here. And then Harley is open having questions afterwards. So as you're listening, if you have questions, there will be time for questions that will also be recorded. So on behalf of all the teachers here in Surrey, I'd like to say thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here.
Great, thank you. CM and his challenge CM, Heichka CM Makwelia, Atuna Atla, Tiaswell. Hopakton since CM, he with the Semiahmoo. Dear friends and relatives, first off, I'd like to thank you for being here this afternoon. My traditional name is Hopakton. I'm one of the elected leaders. You saw me scrunch my face. They say chief, and I go, ugh. I don't like that title. It's not our traditional form of leadership and of I don't even want to say governance, leadership and how I'm a spokesperson. I'm a spokesperson on behalf of my community and my young people and my elders, the matriarchs from our family. That's what my role and responsibility is. And I'm an elected official, so I say I'm the guy that won the popularity contest, and now I get to learn how to do this work. So before I begin, I'm just going to sing I just left the Aboriginal event that's at Earl Marriott, all the Aboriginal support workers and people that chose to go that route. I was there this morning, so I'm switching gears a bit. And coming here and understanding some of the work you're doing, the song I'm going to sing is a variation of our flood song that our relatives from Lummi sing. A little bit of history before that. I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are as Semiahmoo people, and then I'll share a little bit about this area and the importance of this area, and obviously our waterways and our streams and estuaries. We as a Semiahmoo, we understand we are descendants of the Connectedness people. Connectedness people are the survivors of the last flood of this area. When we were told the origin of who we were, they took the old people at that time before the flood. They saw that flood coming. They foresaw the future and saw that flood coming, and they carved two giant, massive dugout cedar canoes. They bound those two canoes together. They put all the children in one, and they put all the supplies in the other. And the flood waters came. The waters rose, the rest of the communities perished, and those floodwaters came back down. From my understanding and my teaching is those floodwaters, those canoes landed just at the north end of the San Juan Islands, out in the islands. That's where those canoes beached. When they beached, some of the kids started to leave, and they started to go off and hunt and gather and fish. Some started to pair up and start life over again. And what one of the older ones was bright enough and smart enough that they realized that they needed to pull those young people back together. And what they said was, we need to remember who we are and where we come from. So we're going to signify your name by putting Mish, M-I-S-H, at the end of your name. And that's going to signify that you come from us as Connectedness people. So when you drive across that imaginary line there at the 49th parallel, the first community past Semiahmoo and Lummi that you hit is the Samish people. Then a little bit further there's the Swinomish people, and then Stillaguamish and Duwamish. I want to say there's about 12. I keep forgetting all of them. But there's either place names or First Nations communities south of the border, and separate from the Squamish people. Squamish people are from a different origin. But we go down that way, and what that does is reminds us, even in today's modern world, how we're all related, how we're all connected. And through the work you're doing, through the work we do to assist and protect our mother here that provides everything for us, we always need to remember that, how our relationship and our connectedness is amongst all of us. Our name that we call ourselves as First Nations people is from Coast Salish territories, Huelmuch. Our origin of that word was the much, talks about that earth. And even the origin to go back further, when the Creator made us as human beings, He told us that, they tell us that he took earth and blew life into it, blew the breath of life into it, and that's what made us as people. A type of people, a race of people, if you will. So that was our origin. And then we as Semiahmoo and Lummi, we never changed our name. We never added to our name because we've never left home. We've always been home here. I was just sharing, and as I was looking at the map and looking at the watershed, I saw a map not long ago where it would have been right around this hill at, I don't remember what that is, right where the Annacis Highway is. How I saw where the Fraser took a hard southward turn and came right through here. So all this area here, the Delta, hence Delta, has been developed over the past, I want to say about 4,000 or 5,000 years. So, but they actually had a map that shared 6,000 years ago, 3,000, 2,000, and how Point Roberts at one time, which we call Chasthunam, the village of Chasthunam, was an island, just a little delta going out to it, and obviously how the change over the years by the development of the delta has changed our landscape. I'll share a little bit more about the history of this, but I'm just going to sing a song real quick. And the reason we sing the songs is a couple reasons. One, we're always told that our old people had that ability to hook the people, hook them in and bring them in. The other thing we do is we always say we fill the empty seats, because our understanding is that relationship between spirit and non-living it's not very far. That it's just, my aunt always says it's like that. It's just the other side. And so we always acknowledge and we take care of that piece and remember that piece. You know, the last piece that I'll share about our kawat or our drum is, you know, we did drums with our young people over spring break. They didn't get a break. They did 4 days of cultural camp or training, learning who we are as Semiahmoo. You know, as I shared this morning and this afternoon as well, you know, we live in a modern system where we send our kids off to school. And really yourselves as teachers spend almost more time a day with our children than we do, as any parents. So it's, you know, we've lost kind of the ability to incorporate a lot of our culture and tradition in with our young people because of those influential years that they spend and learning a different way. And I appreciate, and I shared this morning and I'll share again, is, you know, one thing as an oral tradition and an oral culture, we never wrote these things down. We never did this. That we have stories or shwachliam. I don't like the word stories. We have our ancient history of when the Creator came here and gave us the written language. If you ever on a field trip, Chetam in Mission is actually the stone figure, the rock, and it tells the story of that. It tells the history of when we got the written language long time ago, and what happened to those men that didn't share it. They were stingy. I don't want to say stingy. They just didn't share it, and now they're that rock. That's the story of that. But the drum is, as we shared with our young people, this isn't a toy. You know, we use drums. People use drums all over the world, and our teaching and our understanding of the kawat is that it's our heartbeat. So I always look, like I was watching the kids. And elementary school teachers, any elementary school teachers? A few, yeah, okay. They, you know, one thing I always do, and especially when the kids are crazy, if I'm there, I'll be like, okay, I'll just start singing. And I'll watch the kids just stop and zone in. And my understanding of that is they still remember because they're still pure. They haven't gotten foggy like us as adults. They're still very pure and in tune, but they still remember that time of being in their mother's belly and connecting to her through that heartbeat. So the tool that we use is our connection to our mother that we're on. You know, all the veins, all the life force, everything that it gives us. So that's what we do with our drums. Our drums maintains that relationship between our earth, our Sal Tamuch, our sacred territory, and us as human beings. So I just like to explain that because in my eyes as a First Nations community, my responsibility in this time of truth and reconciliation that's filtering down is education. Nobody can tell the story of the Semiahmoo people except the Semiahmoo people. You know, you might be really good at looking into things, but you won't find much on us as Semiahmoo people. We've been a little bit too quiet for a little bit too long, I'll say that. But we've been very, very protective for lots of reasons over our history and our culture and traditions. We've been very protective. Not just us as Semiahmoo, but all of us as definitely as Coast Salish people. So I'm grateful and I'm thank you for being here today and your interest. Maybe you're just like, yes, I don't have to sit in a classroom today. That's the best part. But being outside and reconnecting is always a good thing, especially for yourselves as teachers, that never-ending give that you get. How do you recharge the batteries? And how do you get back? And the best way I always find is this. Almost throw your watch out, throw your cell phone away, and come and just connect for a little while. So again, the song I'm going to sing is a variation of the flood song. And one thing I shared this morning and I'll share here is, my one relative, he would always say, we're all made of the same thing. We all have this thing that gives us life, just like the creeks, just like the oceans, just like the trees. We call it shwali. We call it that life force. And that's how all living things are related. And all living things are connected. Science teachers? Couple of you guys. Okay. Science is finally catching up. I just was reading the other day how they're showing how the oxygen and the air that we're breathing right here, right now, and the CO2 that we expel and gets recycled through the trees, the way it's circulating our whole world, that the actual air that we're breathing will be on the other side of the world within the next 4 days. So when we talk about a real relationship and connectedness, it's much bigger than maybe we realize. And as we understand us as human beings, when we're close, when we're young like that, we're still very grounded and connected. We're still very close to whatever you want to call that thing. We call it spirit, right? Whatever that is. And then as you age, you get foggy. You cloud a bit. And then as you get older, you start to get close again because you're going back to spirit again. So that's the understanding, and that's why we say, you know, that in our culture we believe our young people and our elders are the most important thing. We're just the workers. We're just the middle people that do all the work and try to protect and provide for all living things. But this area that you're in, this area of Crescent Beach. So Crescent Beach was a very extensively used area for shellfish. We right now, as Semiahmoo, in partnership with our relatives in Tsawwassen, we're looking at having this whole area declared an archaeological site. The age that they've proven to come out of this area is about 6,000 or 7,000 years old. So here, just down the way, where all these beautiful, nice, big houses are going in, and the earthwork that happens, we uncover a lot of human remains, a lot of artifacts, and they found a shell-midden site that was 12 feet deep. So if we understand shell-midden, collection obviously out, and that's why this was such an important place, because of how the tide goes, and how our elders would tell us when the tide goes out, the table is set. So when the tide goes out, we'd go collect and gather, and it's obviously changed quite a bit over the years. But we'd go and shellfish. So shell-midden, shell, take the clam or the mussel, throw the shell. Shell, shell. So that piled 12 feet deep, and the size of this tent. And I asked our archaeologist, I said, well, roughly how long? How long does that take? And he goes, it's probably about 5,000 years. And this is nothing, right? And we were actually down on I got a call shortly after I came into this role that they found human remains down here. And we went, and I was helping our archaeologists kind of sift through and get them out of the ground so that we could rebury them. And he goes, it's in that box, just grab it. And he's just very nonchalant about it. He deals with this every day. And I went over and grabbed the box, and I kind of hear it. He goes, take the skull out. So I realized I was holding this skull in my hand, and fully intact human skull. And it was not a deformity, but the abnormalities that our old people used to do when we were little babies. They used to bind them to their baby boards, and they'd shape and elongate their heads as a sign of class, high class. They mimicked, and they shared a little bit different. So this was an old woman, which we never really, usually when they find ancestral remains, they find younger people, or they find them scattered because they've been previously disturbed. But this was a fully intact old elder. And he said, 1, we rarely ever find elderly people. 2, we rarely ever find these kinds of people. So it was, when we start to, and that's why we're trying to do that in Crescent Beach, because through the Heritage Act, it's pockets. So if we looked at the desktop of Crescent Beach area, it'd be littered with archaeological sites. But what we're trying to do is have a blanket on the whole of the area. We know with sea level rise that this won't be here long. It's not going to last 100 years. As we understand sea level rise and some of the work that Surrey's doing in looking at this area, they're going, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do. So as we understand the evolution of our world, the evolution of our territory and our communities, we start to dig deeper into where do we go from here. This morning we were really we had a presentation that really talked about reconciliation and how do we all have a piece and a hand in that. And I always say that's a good question. That's a good question. I don't quite know yet. And there's lots of good ideas, but we're an ever-evolving community, ever-evolving structure. So one last thing I'd like to share about this area. So when we look across at Point Roberts, it's over there. So if we look over at Point Roberts, I mentioned the village of Chusthunham. And that was a very extremely important fishing site for us. It was the home of one of our very ingenious fishing methods. So as we understand, underneath there, the reef kind of does this. It's got a wave action to it. And in that reef, we had a reef net. So thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of people in this area, and purse seining. Basically, what it was an ingenious way of purse seining for fish. And this area right here was one of the main, because we were around the corner and then we'd come here, summer villages here. But our main village was over close, across the bay from where our village is in Semiahmoo now. But extremely important and culturally significant place. So right across the way here is, right over here, right where it's the high ground starts to go up. Is that Ocean Park? Is that Tsawwassen over there? So right over there where we get to Beach Grove, any people that are familiar with Ladner and Delta and Tsawwassen, Beach Grove is yet another extremely high potential archaeological site just because of the numbers that lived in that area. So it's always important that we know, when we talk about, the ground that we're on, I always say, I'm going to be in it one day, right? We go back to this. That's our relationship. That's our relationship. We're just here. So that area, again, is a very culturally significant place because we have a lot of people. They actually just found some really, really cool yew-wood wedges in a wet site. So because it's a delta, this whole area is a delta, it's sand, and then you go down so far and it's marsh, basically. It shakes, it talks about liquefying, but they found in that wet site 5 perfectly preserved, my cousin showed me a picture of it, and I thought, wow, who made this? And they said, no, they pulled that out of the wet site. And they figure that wet site's about 25 to 3,000 years old. So when we talk about the history of this area, we're talking an extremely ancient, extensive history to this area. So, and as we say as Semiahmoo, because of, when we talk about the flood, just the last thing, I said that before, didn't I? From the flood, as we understand it, was the melting of the last ice age of this area. That's what it would have been, scientifically comparing. That was about 14,000 years ago. So we understand, us as Semiahmoo, we can archaeologically prove we've been in our bay about 10 to 12,000 years. So when we talk about the history of this area, very, very ancient, very, very beautiful. I think there's a big piece of our history that, really we just didn't talk about. We didn't talk about from the fear of repercussions, the fear of laws that were through the Canadian governance at the time to kind of hold that information back. So our old people were very, very protective. And now we're in a new era. And as I said, and I'll say to you guys the same I said this morning, you're here talking about our watersheds and our earth, our mother. So how do we impact our young people to be agents of change? We live in a very crazy and controversial world sometimes when we talk about progress and industrialization, but how do we keep a level of purity to what we have? The example of these 2 creeks, rivers that come out of here, they're not in the greatest shape because of upriver. Actually, I just remembered while I was sitting here, Serpentine is across the way. It's over here. I was told that the Serpentine's original name was Chow, and that's one of the traditional names that I carry, one of the Indian names that I carry. So I just remembered that. I went, hey, I'm here. I'm here. But there was also a people here. I'll just stop saying that. One thing we never talk about is the extinct peoples. Right in this area, right here and over across, they kind of lived up on the hill here. There was a Snoqualmie people that were eradicated through warfare and disease. They were completely wiped out. And some of those people joined into the Semiahmoo. Some of those people went across to the Katzie and the Kwantlen as well. So I always like to acknowledge those people because there was another inhabitant here that's not here anymore. So again, through the development of this area, it's definitely changed. And it will again. We're going to be underwater soon. We're going to be beachfront up the hill soon enough, right? So I just wanted to, again, thank you. Thank you for the work that you're doing, or at least attempting to do, right? I know it's challenging. We're in, as I said, we're in a different time where we look at progress and we look at moving forward and economics, and then we also look at how do we balance the two? How do we take care of our mother and move forward at the same time? So it is through, and part of our work we're doing now with Semiahmoo is good business, good works, good projects, good, raising the bar so that if you want to do work in this area, okay, you're going to have, if regular standards are here, you're not anymore, you're up here. And, we really got to kind of take a look at that. Because as many of you know, when you do this work, it's rarely ever is it one big thing. It's the death by 1,000 cuts. And it's just the constant. So that's the challenge that we struggle with. And through the development of our home, we look at that. So again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for giving me the long opportunity to share.